Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, good night, all the things. Welcome to Math Class, children. Are we ready for a wonderful day of fractions and decimals? I figured we would be. All right, so today we have two things we want to talk about, and that is going from fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions. Okay, so we want to go from one to the other and go back and forth and back and forth. All right, so the way that we're going to do this, we're going to start with fractions to decimals. We're going to start with fractions, turn them into decimals. Do you remember what I told you a fraction was the same thing as if we had any fraction? 1/2. A fraction is division. A fraction is division. So when we're trying to find a fraction and turn it into a decimal, we are going to divide. So let's say I have 1/2. Okay, let's say I want to solve 1/2. One way I can write 1/2 is 1 divided by 2. You need to remember, I'm going to put this over here. This will be our helpful guide here. So we have a fraction, a over b. And I say a and b because it doesn't actually matter what those values are. They can be any values we want to be, but they're going to be a and b. When we divide and we put this in long division, we're going to end up putting b on the outside and a on the inside. Okay, so when we take our fraction, our bottom number is going to go on the outside for long division, and our top number is going to go on the inside. So if I were to write 1/2 as long division, it would be 2 into 1. And then we tell ourselves, all right, well, how many times can 2 go into 1? Well, it can't go into 1. So what do we do in a situation like this? Well, when we get to the point where it can't go into something, when it can't go into anything, we want to add a decimal and bring it up. Our decimal is just going to come straight up. Decimal comes straight up. We add a decimal and bring it up, and then once we add a decimal, we can add as many zeros after that decimal as we want. Doesn't matter how many. Once we add a decimal, we can add as many zeros that it takes for us to solve our fraction. So now we know 2 can't go into 1, but 2 can go into 10. And how many times can 2 go into 10? 5 times. 2 times 5 is 10, and that leaves me with nothing. So I don't actually care about these zeros here. I erase them, and my problem is done. 1/2 equals 0.5. Okay, let's try that with another fraction. Let's try another example of what we just did here. Another fraction, same kind of method, same thing we're dealing with here. We're going to do it with another fraction. We're going to say, all right, well, what about 3/4? Well, 3/4 is 3 divided by 4, which is 3 divided by 4. I'm going to start by adding a couple zeros because all of my fractions, whenever I have a fraction, I'm going to have a decimal in there. So I'm going to bring my decimal straight up, forget about it, and now I'm going to do my division. 4 goes into 3, 0 times. 4 goes into 30, 7 times, and that's a remainder, or that's multiply, you get 28. Bring down a 2. Here, bring down this 0. 4 goes into 20, 5 times, and 3/4 is the same. whoops, here's our 20 and our 0. We're all done. It's the same as 0.75. 0.75. And that would be the value of this fraction. All right, let's try again. It never hurts to do more examples. You might feel like we're in pain right now, but it doesn't actually hurt to do more examples. Let's do an improper fraction maybe. Let's say we have, whoops, not that. Let's say we have 6 fifths. 6 fifths equals 6 divided by 5, which equals 6 divided by 5. I'm going to add a decimal and some zeros to get myself started here. And I bring my decimal up, and I forget about it. All right, 5 goes into 6. 5 does go into 6, actually. It goes in one time, and that is a 5 with a subtraction of 1. Bring my 0 down. 5 goes into 10 2 times. That's a 10 with a subtraction with nothing. This 0 means nothing to me. So 6 fifths equals 1.2, or 1 2/10. This is going to be one where it's going to be, all right, we've really got to make sure we know our division. We really need to know how to do long division in order to convert fractions to decimals. Okay, I want to talk about 2 types of decimals we might see. Actually, we'll keep this right here. This decimal right here, 1 2/10, this is called a terminating decimal. Terminating decimal. It stops, right? It stops right at this 1 2/10. It doesn't go any further. You're not going to have more numbers after that. It stops. It comes to a good natural stopping point. So a terminating decimal is just an example of a decimal stopping. When we had 3/4 equals 0.75, that is also a terminating decimal. It stops. After that 5 was there, we stopped. We had no more numbers we needed to add in. That's one type of decimals that you might see. Another one you might see is called a repeating decimal. A repeating decimal would be something like, okay, let's do 4/9. And 4/9 equals 4 divided by 9 equals 4 divided by 9. We're going to add some zeros in here. And let's start mathing. I'll bring my decimal up. Don't want to forget about my decimal. 9 goes into 4, 0 times. 9 goes into 40, 4 times. And that is a 36. Here's a 4 with a 0. 9 goes into 40 4 times. That's a 36. Here's a 4. I can add another 0. Bring it down. 9 goes into 40 4 times. 36. Here's a 4. I can add another 0. Bring it down. 40. Do you see a pattern going on here? I'm never going to run out because I continue to have 40, 36, 40, 36, 40, 36, 40, 36. I'd have another 40, 36 over here. This is going to repeat on and on forever and ever and ever. I could sit here and do the math on this forever and ever and ever, or I can draw a line that goes over my numbers here, over my repeating numbers to say this is going to repeat forever. This 0.444444 will repeat forever and ever. I have a repeating decimal. This is called a repeating decimal. You may have seen this before in your lives, but this means that the decimal is going to go on and we never end with it. So those are two ways that we're going to see fractions turning into decimals, either terminating or repeating. All right, let's now talk about decimals to fractions. I don't know what happened to that S there, and my letters got weird here at the end. I don't know, weird. All right, that is a distraction. So we're going to say, all right, what about, I have a decimal like 0 and 36 hundredths. What am I going to do with this decimal? Well, one thing we need to remember is we need to remember all of the place values of our decimal number. So before we get into this, I'm going to move over here and I'm going to write out a big decimal number, or a number. We're numbered just like this. It's not huge, but it has a lot of numbers to it. And we're going to talk about our different place values here in this number. This 5 is in the tens place value. 2 is in the ones. 3, does anyone know? The tenths. Once we get to our decimal here, all the values afterwards have an th at the end. This 1 is in the hundredths. This 8 is in the thousandths. And this 4 is in the ten thousandths. This would be something to write down. If you were someone who was taking good notes, I would write this down right here so that you can have a gauge as to where our numbers are coming from. Because knowing place values is how we turn decimals into fractions. We turn our decimals into fractions by knowing our different place values. All right, so with that being said, we're going to come over here and we're going to say, all right, my decimal is 0 and 36 hundredths. So to turn it into a fraction, I want to look at my last place. I want to look at my last place value here. Place value of my last number. And this number 2 places in for my decimal point is what place value? Yes, this is the hundredths. And since it's the hundredths, my denominator is going to be 100. If it was in the tenths, my denominator would be 10. If it was in the thousandths, my denominator would be 1,000. If it was in the millionths, my denominator would be a million, and so on and so forth. Whatever place value my last final digit is, that is what multiplied version of 10 goes into my denominator, 100. And then the rest of all of my number here goes on top with no decimal point. 36 over 100. And then I want to simplify. I want to say, oh, well, 36 and 100, well, those can both be divided by 2. 36 divided by 2 is 18. 100 divided by 2 is 50. Both of those are even numbers. Those can both be divided by 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 50 divided by 2 is 25. And 9 and 25 cannot both be divided by the same thing. Therefore, this is the answer to this decimal. 36 hundredths is the same as 9 25ths. 9 25ths equals 36 hundredths. Okay, well, what about a decimal that looks like this? 1 and 28 hundredths. Well, again, my last digit here is in the hundredths, so my denominator will be 100. And then 28, oh, sorry, not 28, not 28, not 28, not 28, not 28. 128, because I don't care about my decimal point. All of my number here goes on top to my value on my numerator. Okay, so 128 goes on top, 100 is on bottom. This is an improper fraction, so I'm going to take 100 away from this top value to give me 1 up here, and then I'm going to be left with 28 over 100. 28 and 100 can both be divided by 2. That gives me 14 50ths. 14 and 50 are both even. Those can both be divided by 2. That gives me 7 25ths. So my answer to 1.28 is 1 and 7 25ths. This one takes, again, a little bit more practice, and it comes into that simplification method that we were working on yesterday. We've got to make sure we're putting our fractions in simplest form. All right, let's work on this some more tomorrow. This has been a long video, I know. Let's work on this tomorrow. This is going to be one that we are going to really want to make sure we know. We're really going to want to make sure we can convert our fractions from decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. We'll be dealing with that a lot. Please come to class with questions. If you don't know, please ask me. The whole point of this is that we can work together to understand this better. All right, have a great rest of your day. See you all tomorrow.